Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Shalom,
Om Swastiastu.
Namo Buddhaya.
Greetings of virtue to all of us. Your Excellency, Mrs. Daliana Hassan, SH, MTex, PhD, as the Dean Faculty of Law, University of Gadjah Mada.
Your Excellency Mr. Adrianto Dwi Nugroho, SH, LLM, LLD, as the Vice Dean for Academic Studentship and Cooperation of the Faculty of Law, University of Gadjah Mada.
Your Excellency, Dr. Mrs. Melinda Eka Yuniza, SH, LLM, as the Vice Dean for Finance, Assets, and Human Resources of Faculty of Law, University of Gadjah Mada.
Your Excellency Dr. Mr. Heribertus Jaka Triana, SH, LLM, MA, as the Vice Dean for Research, Community Service, and Information System of Faculty of Law, University of Gadjah Mada.
Your Excellency, Mrs. Sriwiyanti Ediono, SH, LLM, HR, PhD, as the Head of Master in Magister of Law, Department of Faculty of Law, University of Gadjah Mada.
Dear sponsors who have helped to make this event success, PT Manggala Alam Lestari and Sinarmas Mining,
Siregar Setiawan Manalu Partnership,
Romulo Silayan and Partners,
PT Cempaka Nusantara Perkasa,
PT Pertamina EP.
the respectable all guests of the Second International Postgraduate Student Conference 2023,
the honorable participants of the Second International Postgraduate Student Conference 2023, and all my charming audiences. Firstly, let's pray and thank our Almighty God who has been giving us mercies and blessings so we can attend and gather in this event, namely the Second International Postgraduate Student Conference 2023.
Ladies and gentlemen, all the guests and audiences, we would like to say, welcome to
The Second International Postgraduate Student Conference 2023.
Master in the Law Faculty of Law, University of Gadjah Mada.
I'm Yohana Vini Valentine along with my partner.
My name is Timothy Donald Moody Jr. Pangemanan.
It is our honor and privilege to be the master of ceremony in this respectable event. Allow me to read this agenda with them, legal challenges and opportunities in the field of human rights, democracy, and social justice in the post-pandemic era.
Our first agenda is opening.
And the second agenda is singing Indonesia National Anthem and Gadjah Mada University hymn.
The third agenda is speech.
The first agenda is welcoming speech as well as the official opening of the Second International Postgraduate Student Conference 2023 by the Dean of the Faculty of Law, Gadjah Mada University.
The fifth agenda is cultural performance.
The last agenda is closing.
Well, before we begin the agenda, let's open our agenda by praying according to each belief and religion.
Thank you very much. The agenda run well.
Now we are going to our second agenda is to deliver our national anthem, Indonesia Raya, and Gadjah Mada University hymn. Please rise for delivering our national anthem and Gadjah Mada University hymn.
Ladies and gentlemen, please be seated. Thank you very much. The third agenda will be speech by our notable speakers. It is my pleasure to introduce our first speaker, Mr. Rilo Pambudi, SH, as the Chief Executive of the Second International Postgraduate Student Conference 2023. The time is yours.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Salam, Om Swastiastu, Namo Buddhaya. Your Excellencies, Dean and Vice Dean Faculty of Law, Universitas Gadjah Mada, the Honorable Head of Master in Law, Faculty of Law, Universitas Gadjah Mada, distinguished government, head of government institution and study centers, dear sponsor, donatur, staff, committees, and ladies and gentlemen, good morning and good tidings to all of us. And to all the presenters, both in this room and Zoom meeting, congratulations on being selected to share your great ideas in this conference. This time, give me great pleasure to express my sincere gratitude and welcome you most coordinated official opening of the Second International Postgraduate Student 2023. Moreover, I honorably welcome our invited speakers who are here with us in this room, Professor Makarim Wibisono, Professor Simon Bad, Dr. Adnike Novasigiro, Professor Thomas Smith as our responders. Ladies and gentlemen, at this second Ingress, we hope to provide special opportunity to gathering the professor, postgraduate students, practitioners, and researchers around the world, and serve as a platform to present innovative research results as well as the latest trends and development in the field of democracy, human rights, and social justice. Therefore, we raise topics that are important to be our concern to find the answer of what needed to improve to address future challenges and opportunities on these three aspects. On behalf of organizing committee, I'm very pleased with the enthusiasm of those who are interested in our topics. The conference has received 122 submitting abstract, which is 81 abstract have been accepted by the convener to present it. Dear participants, and especially the presenters, we not only provide space for knowledge transfer or discussion, but there are many locations that can be used during break time. In the behind of audience, there is a place for casual conversation. And if you would like to enjoy a coffee, we have Lembah UGM cafeteria in behind of auditorium. And we also have variety of very convenient academic facility in the Faculty of Law area. In addition, my deepest gratitude goes to steering committees, conveners, my amazing organizing committees, facilitator, institution, sponsor, and donors who have supported the success of this conference. The committee has organized a vibrant scientific program and is working hard to present highly respected and internationally notorious speakers to lead it. Although we have tried our best to be professional, on behalf of the organizing committee, please accept our sincere apologies if there are any unpleasant things before, during, and after the conference. Last but not least, it said that anyone who has to Jogja will be filled with longing. Hopefully, Ingress will be one of the causes of the longing, especially the audience and participants. I hope we can meet again at the third Ingress. I wish all a good morning and thank you. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Salam Om Swastiastu, Namo Buddhaya, and good tidings to all of us.
Thank you very much for the speech, Mr. Rilo Pambudi, SH.
Our second speaker is Mrs. Sriwiyanti Ediono, SH, LLM, HR, PhD, as the Master in Magister of Law, Department, Faculty of Law, University of Gajah Mada. The stage is yours.
Good morning, everyone. The Vice Dean, honorable speakers, participants, steering and organizing committee. It is a pleasure to have you all of here to attend the second International Postgraduate Conference organized by Master in Law Program, Faculty of Law, Universitas Gajah Mada. Why does Master in Law Programs organize this conference? Master in Law Programs is one of the pioneers in postgraduate law in Indonesia. We establish excellence and high quality of higher law education. We have contributed to provide a learning space for lectures in different universities all over Indonesia, think tank in various government institutions, law enforcement agency, and NGOs. So we also have established a research center in our faculties. Such conference is part of our strategy to strengthening our academic cultures, to engage with other scholars, practitioners, experts in local and also global level. This conference is also to explore new knowledge and ideas about the future developments of law and how the society of law can contribute to address problems in society in various fields: social justice, democracy, and human rights. Why does Master-in-Law UGM think international conference is important? Why do we need to invite Pak Simon Butt? Actually, he's our alumni as well, yeah. And Bulia Scortino, Prof. Thomas. It's come from global, we can say. It comes from the different country context. We are aware that law and legal system is not alienated with other system existed in society. Although Indonesian law is very specific context, but from the lawmaking process in Indonesia, the development of law is also influenced by different factors, including the situations in global, the disruption of technology, the disaster, war, pandemic, and so on. Many of Indonesia's law are blended ideas and frameworks that come from different experiences or best practices from different countries. For example, we do have anti-corruption law, we do have anti-sexual violence, the tax law, and so on. It came from also different ideas that come from the different contexts. We cannot longer focus only what we have in Indonesia. So in adding this, the global and local, regional and transnational, the interdisciplinary, multidisciplinary, transdisciplinary approaches are become more and more important. This is the second postgraduate conference. The first conference was organized just a month before the COVID-19 spread. Yeah? The first Ingress has theme of the legal challenge in the disruption of technology in 4.0. The second Ingress, we will focus on legal challenge and opportunities in the field of human rights, democracy, and social justice in the post-pandemic era. So it is a continuing discussions. It is part of our Dies Natalis as well, Bapak Ibu. So this is the 77 years of the existence of Faculty of Law. 70 years, yeah. Let us do solving of ideas and findings with 89 participants coming from 30 universities all over Indonesia and from abroad, that including Malaysia, Philippines, Thailand, UK, and US. Let us talk each other and know each other. Let us having fun, enjoy the conference, enjoy UGM, and also enjoy Yogyakarta. Thank you very much. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Shalom, Om Santi Santi Om, and God bless us.
Thank you very much for the beautiful speech from Mrs. Sriwiyanti Ediono, SH, LLM, HR, PhD. And our third and last speaker is from Mr. Adrianto Dwi Nugroho as the Vice Dean for Academic Studentship and Cooperation of the Faculty of Law, University of Gadjah Mada, as well as opening the second International Postgraduate Student Conference, which will be followed by the beating of the gong. Mr. Adrianto Dwi Nugroho, the stage is yours.
The Honorable Dr. Atnike Novasigiro, Chairwoman of the National Commission for Human Rights of the Republic of Indonesia, the Honorable Professor Simon Butt, Director of the Center for Asian and Pacific Law at the University of Sydney, the Honorable Professor Makarim Wibisono, highly respected diplomat of the Republic of Indonesia, the Honorable Professor Thomas Schmitz, the Honorable Vice Dean Jaka Triana, the Honorable Head of Study Program, Bu Yi, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. So on behalf of the Dean, please allow me to welcome all of you to the second International Postgraduate Students Conference, organized by the Master of Law Study Program at the Faculty of Law UGM. This conference will be held for 3 days from today until Saturday, 9th to 11th of February. And as Bui mentioned, it highlights the theme of legal challenges and opportunities in the field of human rights, democracy, and social justice in the post-pandemic era. Now, proceedings of this event is expected to develop more comprehensive post-pandemic responses by involving academia and other related actors across the world to respond, criticize, and to offer solutions, as well as to reformulate our understanding of the post-pandemic era with the emphasis on interdisciplinary and multidisciplinary perspective. And I'm glad that the organizers have successfully attracted 9 distinguished international and national speakers and not less than 122 participants from across different countries, including Indonesia, the US, the UK, Thailand, Australia, and Malaysia. There will be 81 teams presenting their papers throughout the next few days. So thank you for all the participants and presenters for this conference. And I would also like to thank and congratulate the organizers for the success of this conference. Ibu Sriwiyanti as the head of the study program, Pak Yance Arizona as the head of the steering committee, Mas Rilo as the head of the organizing committee, and all the students and staff of the Faculty of Law who have contributed restlessly their effort to organize this conference. I saw how they hold a weekly meeting, and it was tiring meetings, like more than 2 hours. So congratulations, all your hard work paid off. And also I would like to thank our sponsors and donators for their support to this conference. And I wish you a very fruitful and enjoyable conference. So enjoy Jogja, enjoy the conference, and enjoy the Faculty of Law UGM. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Adrianto Dwi Nugroho.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, coming to our next agenda, there will be a cultural performance by Seni Tari Pasca Sarjana UGM. We invite you to show
Tari Wira Pertiwi.
Ladies and gentlemen, we would like to invite you to another round of applause for the beautiful performance.
Ladies and gentlemen, all the guests and audiences, we are going to the last agenda, which is closing. We are grateful because our agenda is running well. Thanks 1,000 times to all participants who have been good in this event.
As a human being, we realize that we cannot avoid mistakes. We are representing all committees of the Second International Postgraduate Student Conference 2023 and would like to say sorry if we have many mistakes. Thank you for your nice attention. The last we say, wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Shalom,
Om Santi 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 Om.
Namo Buddhaya.
Greetings of virtue to all of us.
We would also like to remind you, as you may find it on the campus map and useful information on the additional information page, this building consists of 7 floors and the most basic is the basement. The first floor consists of the main seminar room for the implementation of Ingress. Second floor up until 7th floor consists of classrooms. Each floor can be accessed either via stairs or elevator.
Each floor has a toilet, and for the disabled, each floor has chairs and discussion tables outside the classrooms. Each floor has an emergency staircase, and each floor has a fire extinguisher. Information on the Faculty of Law, University of Gadjah Mada, buildings, Gedung A, Gedung B, Gedung 3, Gedung 4, Gedung 5, library, and middle garden.
Each conference participant is expected to be able to understand the instruction from the committee, especially in terms of, first, rules during the conference.
Second, in unexpected cases such as natural disasters, A, you are advised not to panic. B, put safety first. C, use the main stairs or emergency stairs if you are on the floors 2 or 7, or don't use the elevator. And D, gather in an open room such as UGM FH parking lot and FH UGM Central Park.
The third, maintain comfort and security during the conference. As for the next agenda, namely the plenary session, for that we invite Mrs. Sri Wiyanti Ediono, SHLLM, PhD, as the moderator to occupy the seats that have been determined. Thank you very much.
Dear participants, today we will start our plenary session. So the theme of this plenary session is the challenge and opportunity for human rights in the past and present. So there are 2 speakers and 1 respondent for this session. So I would like to invite all the speakers and respondents to sit with me in front. Thank you. That is Prof. Makarim, yeah, and then Ibu Atnike, and as well Pak Thomas. I just want to check whether I'm audible through the Zoom, yeah? Okay. So as you might aware that Indonesia and global has faced many difficulties in the last 3 years. We have COVID-19 that influenced a lot of aspects in our life. In several regions, we have faced not-ending war, and now the Ukraine war with the Soviet. It creates more tension in different countries, particularly in Europe as well, where the Pak Thomas actually originally came. The questions are how we deal with all of these tensions, specifically how are the challenges in human rights in the future. For Indonesian specific context, last year, I know that everybody might aware that we have a homework that is the gross human right, past gross human right violations. Yeah, and then last year the president has appointed the team to settle past gross violence human rights. Yeah, through a judicial mechanism, and this year I think continuing that happens in the past, we have a lot of issue on human rights. So that is why we have two speakers and one respondent today. Yeah, I want to introduce them. The first one is Prof. Makarim Wibisono, PhD. Prof. Makarim is the former United Nations Special Rapporteur on the occupied Palestinian territories and the president of the Economic and Social Council of United Nations in New York in 2000s, and the chairman of the United Nations Commission on Human Rights in Geneva in 2005. He was appointed as the executive director of the Asian Foundation, the special advisor of the Ministry of Health, the speaker of the House of Representatives of Indonesia, and also the member of the World Health Organization Review Group. I believe that he was also as the chair of Dewan HAM, the Human Rights Council 2015. So Prof. Makarim actually one of the alumni in UGM, but in the Visipol, and then he got a professor from a University of Airlangga. It's a lot of experiences that I couldn't say one by one, so please give applause for Prof. Makarim. And then I want to introduce my colleague here, Ibu Atnike Novasigiro, Dr. Atnike Novasigiro, MSc. Her position today is the chairman of the National Human Rights Commission, and then she was graduated from Visit University of Indonesia, yeah. And then before, as the chairman and a commissioner of human rights, she was a lecturer. She's still a lecturer, yeah, of the diplomacy postgraduate programs in Paramadina University, Jakarta. She was also the coordinator program of Institute for Community Studies and Advocacy, ELSAM. She was also joined with the Asian and East Asian Human Rights Advocacy Program Manager, the Asia Forum on Human Rights and the Development, Forum Asia. Yeah? And then she was also the Executive Director of Chief Editor of Jurnal Perempuan and the co-founder of Lokataru Foundation. Give applause for Ibu Atnike. And then Prof. Thomas Smith, he is my colleague. He stayed in the office that actually near to my office in fourth floor. And Prof. Thomas Smith has become a lecturer in UGM, yeah, since 2018. I think this year is the 5th year of Pak Thomas staying with us in Faculty of Law. And he's actually doctor in law before, yeah, in the Göttingen University, and then associate professor before in Göttingen, and then his career are more likely in the education. He was teaching in different country as well. So give applause for Pak Thomas. Dear participant, I think we have a very lucky because we have Pak Makarim, Bu Atnike, and then Pak Thomas. So the first session I will give to Pak Makarim, Prof. Makarim, to give kind of presentation with regard to what is exactly his experiences and his thoughts about the team that we call as the non-judicial mechanism, yeah, and he will share about what exactly the challenge to fulfill the victim rights of the past gross human rights violation, and then he might give us some thoughts about how do we move forward with regard to this issue. Time is yours, Pak Makarim, and then yes, it is about 20-25 minutes. Thank you.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Salam sejahtera, Om Swastiastu, salam kebajikan, dan selamat pagi. First of all, I would like to pay homage to the Dean and the Vice Dean of the School of Law of University of Yogyakarta. I would like to congratulate for the new building, because this is the first time I come and enjoy this beautiful building. Because when I went here earlier, about 5 years ago, to discuss about business and human rights, I still have a meeting in the other room, not a beautiful room like this. Secondly, I have to pay homage to Ibu Atnike, the chairman of Komnas HAM, Ibu Ii, Ibu Ii is the one who organizing this one, who contacted me. Also Professor Thomas, Professor Simon, also all my friends that are available here. I'm actually very pleased to be invited in this very important forum. I am impressed with the organizer, because the organizer gave me some key questions to be answered. Because in other occasions, usually it's up to me to try to talk about something, but now I have a guidance, the key question that given by the organizer are four. One of it is, how are the progress in settling past human rights through non-judicial mechanism? Second is, how does the non-judicial mechanism can fulfill the right of victims in reparation? The three, what are the challenges in settling non-judicial mechanism? And fourth, is there any resistance from the victims' movement, and how to respond to resistance? All right, so that's the presentation, Now I try myself to structure my presentation leading toward to answer the four questions. First is about the progress, One, the Indonesian government recognized such abuses took place and awarded the Jasa Pratama Star to the victims of the Trisakti event. This took place several years ago. Secondly, the National Commission of Human Rights, Komnas HAM, now is under the chairmanship of Ibu Atnike, issued letters to certify that the persons are indeed victims of human rights violations, or it is called SKKPHAM. These are the basis for Victim and Witness Protection Agency, or LPSK, to provide compensation in the form of money and health facilities to the victims. The other one is the Ministry of State-Owned Enterprise, or BUMN, in cooperation with Bank Tabungan Negara, have distributed land ownership certificate and houses to the families of the victims of the Trisakti event. It's already distributed. Next is the provincial government of DKI Jakarta has constructed a memorabilia of Tugu Reformasi and changed the name of the bus stop near Trisakti University into Grogol 12 May Reformasi in recognition of the event. The municipal government of the city of Balikpapan honors the late Hendrawan C., one of the victims of the Trisakti event, by naming a street in Balikpapan. And finally, the municipal government of the city of Palu utilized the City Plan of Action of Human Rights, or RAN-HAMDA, as the basis to issue a measure of Palu decree to provide compensation to the victim or the family of the victim. Next, please. Beside the former approach, the non-government organization also provide significant steps dealing with this issue. One, the youth communities of Nahdlatul Ulama and several places in Indonesia have established good communication through cooperation and reconciliation to the victims' community. Two, similarly, church communities in Eastern Nusa Tenggara have built cooperation and reconciliation with victims' community. Number three, University Trisakti has taken several steps, among others, naming building and nearby streets with the names of the victims of the Trisakti event. Additionally, the university distributed houses to the families of the victims in the residential complex originally designed for lecturers and professors. So this is actually the reflection how the communities as well as the non-governmental organization responses to the victims of the gross violation of human rights, which is actually, this is the state responsibility. So why I stated that this is the state responsibility? Because Indonesia is a democratic state that upholds the rule of law. Two, Indonesian Constitution pointed out that the state has the responsibility to protect, to promote, to enforce, and to fulfill human rights. This enshrined in the Article 281.4 of the Constitution 1945. Democracy also urges the state to build its accountability to whatever event takes place in the country. Accountability is paramount important because state authority comes from the people's right. As the owner of those rights, that should be fulfilled. Finally, in dealing with the gross violation of human rights, the state shall respect the victim's right and make sure gross violation of human rights in the country does not occur now and in the future. This is the past, the first answer that I prepare to answer the first question. The second question is about how can we fulfill the right of victims in reparation. I try to explain it based on my experience in the team that created by the Presidential Decree number 17 of 2022, dated on the 26th of August 2022. It's the non-judicial process that is assigned by the President to the team is designed to formulate recommendations on restoring victims' rights, including physical rehabilitation, social rights, health facility, fellowships, and other things that are aligned to the interests of the victims and their family. The TPP harm shall open them up for analysis and factors that lead toward gross human rights violation. The TPP harm formulate the recommendation also on restoring victims' rights and that of their family. The TPP harm shall formulate recommendation of non-recurrent of gross violation of human rights in Indonesia. We have two important references from the United Nations in related to gross violation of human rights, namely the United Nations Basic Principle on the right to remedy and reparation for victims of gross violation on international human rights and serious violation of international humanitarian law adopted by the UN General Assembly of March of the victims. Due to the absence of reliable lawyer who work for them, therefore the government should provide, the support to the victim. Finally, I try to support the question on the resistance from the victims movement. The victims and the family of the victim acknowledge that teams from several institutions, including the government, discuss their cases. They are apprehensive whether the TPP harm is truly different than the other. So initially there are no trust, or there is a suspicion with regard to the genuine desire of the TPP harm. Some of the victims and the family of the victim are prejudiced that the TPP harm work is designed to replace the judicial mechanism as an expediency ahead of the upcoming political election, because election will take place in February 2024. Some families of the victims of May 1908 are not interested to raise the issue again. They explain that their daughters have successfully married, and reopening the case may negatively impact the family because they have already children, they live nicely with the couple. Family of the victims in Barutikung, Semarang, of the extrajudicial killing, or famously called the mysterious killing of Petrus, are not eager to highlight the issue again. Some have daughters who stand ready to marry young military officers and are worried that relation to a past crime will negatively impact the future of the daughter. Maybe you are aware that in Java culture, if you are going to arrange the marriage of your daughter or your son, you have to know who is the original of your son-in-law. Yeah, there is a wording of bobot, bibit, bobot. Yeah, so if they know that the daughter is related to the former crime leaders, it may affect negatively to the future of the daughter. The TPP harm always support the judicial mechanism if evidence and witness are available. Oftentimes, we make position of TPP harms known to media and the public about our position. I told the victims and the family of the victims that TPP harm will promise nothing. TPPHAM will produce credible recommendations to be implemented by the government. So I told them, let us pray together that the government will do so accordingly. Finally, I will say that I appreciate to the Faculty of Law, University of Gajah Mada, and the International Postgraduate Student Conference in Grace for giving me the opportunity to join this event. This event is a very important mainstreaming human rights in the development of new Indonesia, whereby human rights are part of its DNA, discussed and respected. Finally, I wish in Grace great success. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for Prof. Makarim. I think Prof. Makarim has shared his own experiences, because I think to settle past gross human rights violation is not very easy, even though the team has already finished their term and they have provided recommendation, but it is not yet finished, and then we still have a long way to go, yeah, to fulfill the right of the victims. And then very interesting to see that the aspirations and the interest of the victim is also very different one to another. So it is also a challenge. And then the data, the updating data about it, I think there is much important, yeah, if we want to provide the reparation. So we have always to have data. And then I think there's a lot of issues that has been discussed by Prof. Makarim. Thank you very much. And now we move to Bu Atnike to share her presentation as well. Time is yours, Bu Atika, again about 20 and 25 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Ibu Sriwiyanti Ediono, or whom I usually call Mbak Iyi. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam.
Shalom, Om Swastiastu, Namo Buddhaya, salam kebajikan, dan salam sehat untuk kita semua. As the conference said, this is about the COVID-19 pandemic, so we are very grateful that we are all in a good health condition to attend this conference. I would like to greet my honorable resource persons here, especially Bapak Makarim Wibisono, the chairperson of the TPP HAM, and then Ibu Sriwiyanti Ediono as the moderator, Bapak Thomas as one of the resource person, and the Vice Dean, and all the faculty member of Master in Law, Faculty of Law, Universitas Gajah Mada, for this honorable opportunity to be to return to the academic world where I used to be, or that I have to take some distance, I think, for the next 5 years. As Pak Makarim explained, as resource person, we are asked a few key questions that we have to share during this session. And for me as Komnas HAM chairperson, most of the questions are about the judicial mechanism on human rights in Indonesia, especially concerning way to address the gross human rights violations in the past. When we say about the past, it is actually referring to the fact that in the past, our nation have faced serious situation in terms of human rights violations that have not been addressed fully or significantly yet due to the lack of judicial mechanism. I will not answer the question in chronological order, but I would like to wrap the answer in my own personal way, in hoping that later it will become an article that can be published after the conference. Yes. Okay. I would like to start to repeat what Pak Makarim has explained, that the victims of gross human rights violations rights have been acknowledged by the international norms and standards. There are 4 of the rights of victims of gross human rights violations. The first is the right to know. It means that victims have the right to know about the incidents, the actual backgrounds, the history, and the fact about the violations that happened or occurred to them, to their families, or to the people surroundings. The second is the right to reparation. As victims, of course, they have to experience hardship due to the trauma, physical, psychological, and sometimes in the case of gross human rights violations, the impacts are huge, that it involves the society. Therefore, the victims are entitled to the right to reparation. The third one is the guarantee of non-recurrence. It means that the victims have the right to be ensured that the same situation, the same violations, the same incident should not be happen again. The fourth right is the right to justice. This is one of the rights of the victims that is most discussed or debated and questioned in public, especially among the community of victims, the community of human rights defenders or organizations, and also the academia, particularly law faculty like UGM, where we are now. But in fact, all the 4 of the rights cannot be separated. Like the principle of human rights, indivisibility, the 4 rights of the victims of gross human rights violations are also indivisible, because one right cannot fully fulfill what has been lost from the victims and their families. Since it was established, Komnas HAM has investigated 17 cases which are concluded as gross human rights violations. 12 of them were being acknowledged by President Joko Widodo on the 11th January this year, and it is almost 1 month after his speech. The other 4, on the case of Timor Timur, Tanjung Priok, Abepura, and Paniai, which are recently being tried, are the 4 cases that have been brought to the Human Rights Court. There is one other cases which has been investigated by Komnas HAM. If you see the PowerPoint presentation, it is number 13, the case of Timang Gajah. This case was not included among the 12 cases that are acknowledged by the President. So there are 17 cases in total which have been investigated by Komnas HAM, but as you can see, only 4 of them have been brought to the Human Rights Court. So what are the story behind this situation? The right to justice indicates that every victim has the opportunity to demand justice under the right to justice, it aims that the perpetrators must be prosecuted and brought to court, and the victims get recovery and compensation. The obligation to prosecute aims to ensure that those responsible for committing gross human rights violations are tried and punished accordingly, primarily to hold the perpetrators accountable through the courts. If you like to know more about the rights of the victims, Komnas HAM has actually published norms and regulation standards on the rights of victims of gross human rights violations, which you can find online on Komnas HAM website. Unfortunately, we don't have it in English available yet. Having all the rights to justice that are prescribed for the victims, the situation of the right to justice are not as clear or not as ideal as it should be. Let's say, among the 17 cases which have been investigated by Komnas HAM, only 4 have been brought to Human Rights Court. So that is a very small number compared to the total investigation. And from the 4 of the cases which have been brought to the court, all the accused or defendants were acquitted. It means no one has been proven to be guilty or to be responsible for the incidents, for the violations that had occurred in the past. The worst situation happened to the victims. Not only they could not know who are the responsible actors, but they are also not eligible or not yet receive any compensation or rehabilitation to the loss that they have experienced. The situation happened because there are challenges in enforcing the judicial mechanism of human rights in Indonesia. I classify the challenges into 2 clusters. Next slide, please. First, this is the concern issues of the legal field or the law school, probably. The legal technicalities. The first, the legal procedures in investigating gross human rights violations. As you perhaps already knew from the media or from any studies about human rights court in Indonesia, there has been ongoing debate or dispute on the standard of investigation between Komnas HAM and the Attorney General Office. Komnas HAM is mandated according to the law number 26 on the Human Rights Court year of 2000 as the body that investigate or conducting the initial investigation upon the suspected gross human rights violations. When Komnas HAM concluded an investigation as gross human rights violations, then the report will be submitted to the General Attorney Office. And it is the responsibility of the General Attorney Office to continue the investigation to or as a legal investigation according to the criminal law. This is still a continuing debate and not yet solved. The second legal technicalities is about the legal perspective in viewing human rights court as the general criminal court and procedure. For example, I'm not an expert on legal, I'm not a law student, but it is a common knowledge among the human rights workers or activists. It is difficult for the human rights court to prove mens rea in an incident where a human rights violation occurred, because the aim of human rights court is to prove there is a systematic structure, widespread incidents when a gross human rights violation occurred. While, as we perhaps know, the general criminal procedures tries to prove the malicious intent of an individual. Therefore, when one individual who is prosecuted as the suspect or defendants, when the person could not be proved for having malicious intent, and then the person will be acquitted. The third, still related to the legal perspective in viewing human rights court, is the use of general criminal procedures that creates challenge in providing evidence, for example, due to the lack of original evidence. Let's say most of the gross human rights violation that we are talking about today happened way far in the past. So many of the evidence are not yet available, or at least the original evidence are not available. Let's say visum et repertum. In some of the cases, the original visum of repertum is no longer available, only the copy, due to the retention of documents. And the person who conducted visum et repertum is no longer alive, and so he or she cannot testify in the court. So these legal technicalities are some of the obstacles why it is difficult to bring Komnas HAM investigation to the court first, and second, when it can be brought to the court, the result mostly are unsuccessful, if we cannot say totally unsuccessful. Because in the case of Tanjung Priok, in the first level of the court, there are some of the defendants were proven to be guilty. But when they appeal to the court, then they were acquitted. So there are some or small success story in the human rights court. The second challenges on the judicial mechanism stem from the political support. For example, in establishing ad hoc human rights court, it means the cases happen before the law number 26, year 2000. The setup of an ad hoc court should be approved by the parliament, and therefore it requires a big political support from different political parties, and therefore it is difficult to happen. That's why among the 4 human rights court, only two of them are the past human rights violations before 2000, while the other 2 are cases happen after 2000, and those 2 are on cases happen in Papua, which is, of course, very political in terms of international attention. The second example of the lack of political support is the lack of support in terms of resources and human resources to the judiciary, the court itself. For example, the appointment of an ad hoc judges serve only for 5 years. So after 5 years, there should be a new appointment. So whenever there is no human rights court take place, there will be no appointment of judges. It means there is absence of judges, especially experienceful judges, which handle human rights court. So very little number of judges have experience on this, since East Timor case and Tanjung Priok and Abu Pura. The third example of the lack of political support was on witness protection, especially this was before LPSK was established. During the case of East Timor and Tanjung Priok, LPSK was not yet established. At the time, how to say, the court was not convenient for the victims to come to the court and testify. But hopefully now it's better because we have now LPSK to protect the victims and witness. So those are the challenges in the judicial mechanism of human rights. For those are some of the reasons why the judicial mechanism has not been effective enough to address the past human rights violation. Next slide, please. While, as Pak Makarim has explained, while we are waiting for the court to be effective, the life of the victims continues to be in struggle. The stigma that they experience since the incident occurred, for example, the 1965, 1998, Petrus, and so on, remain living with the families. They don't want public to know that they are victims because the victims are attached to negative stigma as rebellions, as penjara, ya, saya lupa namanya, robbers, something like that, or criminals, like in the case of Petrus. The victims also experience discriminations, although now it's getting lesser, but in the past, we all know that some of the victims, especially from the 1965, they cannot even join the general election to be candidate, or they cannot sit in as civil servants due to the discrimination. The third one that are commonly happen to the victims of gross human rights violations are economic marginalization. The fourth forms of situation that are experienced by victims, as I explained earlier, are physical and psychological effect of the violations. Therefore, some of them, they don't even want to share to their neighbor, to their own family, that they are part of the victims of the past gross human rights violations. Linking the situation with COVID-19 pandemic, the victims of past gross human rights violations are in similar situation with other marginalized groups that must face worse impact of the pandemic, especially due to their economic hardship and their age, as most of them are elderly persons. I don't know whether it is my assessment is correct or not. For example, in the past 1 year, during the COVID-19 pandemic, I noticed there are several victims or families of the victims that are gone due to sickness and age, whether it relates to the situation of pandemic and their social situation. This need to be further research, I guess. Please let me know if I talk wrong. 2 minutes, okay. So why the implementation of non-judicial mechanism is in line with the victim's right to remedy? First, a person's rights as a victim remain valid even if the perpetrators cannot be identified or cannot be proven guilty. Second, this is one of the dimensions that is often overlooked. Gender justice is also important dimension in the principle of remedy for the victims. Third, remedy must be provided with efforts that are close to the impact of returning to their original condition, or in the legal term, restitutio in integrum. Fourth, the remedial process for victims is non-sequential or non-linear. It means remedies can be carried out whether simultaneously or parallelly. So we can have human rights court while having Truth Commission or TPP HAM all together, or as a simultaneous. Victims' right to remedies are complementary. Therefore, a mechanism or form of remedy cannot be used as a substitute for other mechanism or remedy, and cannot be declared unilaterally as a form of settlement that is considered final, because it is impossible to reach restitutio in integrum. Therefore, we can see even through TPP HAM, through Human Rights Court, there will be victims who say that justice is not served for them. Just to compare how judicial and non-judicial mechanism complementing each other, the judicial mechanism focus on the experience of the defendants or perpetrators. It is based on legal and micro evidence and mostly function as deterrent effect so that people do not repeat the action. Non-judicial, focusing on the experience of victims, and it is made based on social and political context. Although there is function of deterrent effect, but the function is in a broader sense in order to prevent recurrence in the society. Non-judicial also has other function or roles, such as to reconcile the society and promoting human rights culture. My last slide would be then, what is the role of Komnas HAM in non-judicial mechanism? Komnas HAM, as mandated under the law number 26/2000, it has role to investigate gross human rights violation. However, through the investigation, Komnas HAM have direct engagement with the victims in taking testimonies, for example, collecting documents from institutions and from the victims. Those information can be used as the basis to acknowledge a victim as officially a victim, which has been conducted by Komnas HAM by issuing surat keterangan korban pelanggaran HAM yang berat since 2015. The other thing that Komnas HAM could do is to coordinate and make referral for victims or witness protection to the LPSK, both in legal procedures and also when victim needs assistance, such as health assistance, as happening in the past few years. So that would be some of my key points in answering the key question of the session, and I'm looking forward for further discussion. Thank you.
So, Bu Atnika, I think this is a very comprehensive presentation. It discussed about what is exactly happening and the suffer of the victim. It is not yet settled. There are 17 big cases, and only 4 cases has been go through the judicial mechanism. So this is a very important point, that is there is no, even though there is non-judicial mechanism, but non-judicial mechanism cannot replace victims' rights of justice, and this still very problematic due to different kind of factor that has been explained by Bu Atnika. Yeah, thank you very much. Now we move to discuss. No, we move to give a time for Pak Thomas. Yeah, Pak Thomas. We want to hear from you what your comment with regard to the presentations come from Pak Makarim and then Bu Atnika, but also we want to hear from you about the experiences in European region during the COVID, and then as well as after the COVID. Perhaps you might share your thoughts about the settlement of the past human rights, gross human rights violation in the context of European, cases. Yeah, time is your, Pak Thomas. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. My comments will be rather short on the two first lectures. Thank you very much. That was very, very interesting for me to hear that. But my comments will be rather short because the situation in Europe is different. And for example, reparations for the victims were only a side problem. That did not cause any problems even after the fall of the Third Reich. To answer a question which I have been asked by the organizers, what about the concept of forgiven of the victim? This did not play a role in Europe at all, because it is impossible to use this concept for the crimes of totalitarian regimes like the Holocaust or the systematic killing at the German border. I think that it would be rather inspiring for Indonesia to study the Rwandan approach after the human rights violations of 1994. But that had also a different constellation than in Indonesia, because there was a regime change which made the Rwandan approach possible. In Europe, we had comprehensive reparation payments by Germany for the victims of totalitarian rule. More than 80 billion euro have been paid for reparation after the end of the National Socialist regime by Germany for the victims of National Socialist crimes. That may look a lot, but it's not if you think what Germany has done in the Second World War. Then 80 billion is not really much, and this is from all the time until 2021. The reparation has been granted in non-judicial administrative mechanisms, simply administrative procedures because for the authorities, but of course with legal remedy to the court. That's why it worked. The authorities, they knew if the victim is not satisfied, then they will go to the court. That had an impact. There were even more comprehensive measures after the end of the East German communist regime. In all of East Europe, the most important was the restitution of the expropriated real estate property, the land, the houses which had been confiscated by the communist regimes. I worked for some years in Latvia. There they had this on a large scale. That was for many victims the most important. But also the access of the citizens to the files of the communist secret service, for example, the Staatssicherheitsdienst in Germany, on them, which was a very sensitive issue because it also showed who in the neighborhood or in the family has spied on me, who has conspired with the communist regime. And of course, rehabilitation and reparation payments also after the end of communist crime. But, ladies and gentlemen, in Europe, the most important was something different. It was the accounting for the past and the criminal prosecution of the perpetrators. There was intensive research and documentation of the crimes of the past by the younger generation. Criminal prosecution of the Nazi offenders came late, mainly only from the 1970s. But there was a very determined prosecution of the wall snipers and East German responsible politicians for the crime of communism in the 1990s. The background is, of course, the old generation who had committed the crimes, they were not interested in accounting to the past. It was the young generation, the 68 rebellion, the people which are now around 70 years old, which asked their parents, hey, daddy, what have you done as a soldier in the Second World War? Have you committed war crimes? Have you been involved in the murder of innocent victims? So the tensions, in particular in the German society, but also in other societies because of the collaborators, was immense, really immense. The most important from the legal perspective in Europe has been the so-called Radbruch formula. I don't know if you know what that means. Gustav Radbruch was a committed positivist. And he needed to admit that legal positivism, that means just to obey the written law, must have limits. The limits are there. It must give way to justice if it contradicts justice at an unbearable level. That has been the most important formula. That means in particular, following the law or following orders of the superiors can never justify or even excuse serious human rights violations. Nobody can say, I have just followed the law or I have just followed the orders. For the coming to the terms with the human rights violations in Europe in the past, that was the most important. Okay, now I would like to give some short comment on the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic from the German and European perspective. And you may know most of these problems. The COVID-19 pandemic brought comprehensive, severe, and most severe restrictions of almost all freedom rights, which had been unknown before like that in Germany and West Europe since the Second World War. There was a total ban of unvaccinated persons from almost all public life in winter 2021-22. There was a general closure of cafes, restaurants, cultural establishments over long periods of time, what we have not seen in Indonesia. There were curfew-like stay-at-home orders for the nighttime. You were not allowed to go out anymore after 10 o'clock. And there were even contact restrictions, even in the private space. In Germany, they only allowed one visitor from outside the own household for some weeks. That means the parents could not invite anymore their son and their daughter-in-law together for dinner. There was an important role of the judiciary in this situation to protect the human rights and the fundamental rights of the citizens under the Constitution, as you may imagine. So that was all checked very thoroughly by the courts. Until September 2020, there were already, just in Germany, 190 court decisions on COVID-19 restrictions. Until the end of 2021, 750. The main legal issue was the compliance with the principle of proportionality, which is known in Indonesia too. This is the most important principle which limits encroachments on fundamental rights. Whenever you interfere with the human right, with the fundamental right, with the freedom of the citizen, there must be, first of all, a legitimate aim. That was no problem. It was the protection of the health and the life of the citizens. The restriction must be suitable to pursue that aim. It must be very helpful. That was a problem discussed in Europe at the beginning, not in Indonesia. That's interesting, not in Southeast Asia. For the wearing of face mask, is the mandatory wearing of face mask helpful to protect against COVID-19 or not? It took 2 or 3 months until there was scientific evidence, and then it turned out, and the court said, yes, this is a suitable measure. The measures to fight the COVID-19 pandemic needed to be necessary. That applies also to Indonesia. Most were, some were not. The administrative courts in Germany annulled many comprehensive general prohibitions because more targeted restrictions would have been enough. The most spectacular was the total ban of all religious services at the beginning of the pandemic. No Friday prayer, no Holy Mass, all forbidden. Until a Muslim community with a individual constitutional complaint before the German Federal Constitutional Court achieved that the court declared this unconstitutional because it was not necessary to prohibit the Friday prayer or the Holy Mass. It was enough to use strict health protocols. That was interesting. There were also a couple of measures which were not thought through thoroughly. For example, in Germany and most European countries, there was a complete closure of restaurants for a long time, when selling food for takeaway could still be allowed. So you see, the Indonesian government with the COVID-19 restriction was much more careful, much more limited, but it was also possible because of the climate conditions. Or another example, there was a ban of all cinema shows. Cinemas were closed, but they also closed the drive-in cinemas, where you go with your car. You have that in Jakarta too. What is the sense of prohibiting that? When you are isolated in your car, you're not in danger and you're not threatening somebody. But there's also one thing to laugh about Jakarta. To give you one example, for 1 week in Jakarta, there was a rule of mandatory face mask in your own car, even if you are alone in the car. So, but after one week, they noticed that this is definitely not necessary. The next aspect, consider, is more difficult. The measures needed to be proportional in the strict sense. That means they needed to be in reasonable proportion to the aim in view. The burden balanced needed not be too hard. Although harsh, most measures were, but some were not. Often, comprehensive measures needed to be moderated by numerous exceptions. For example, they had the curfew in Germany, but there were so many exceptions. For example, visiting your sick parents, going out with the dog, doing sport, that finally the streets were anyway not empty. I think in Australia they were tougher there. But also, very interesting, a parallel to Indonesia, but on a much larger scale, the severity of the measures was alleviated by accompanying state support measures, financial support on a large scale for companies, workers, and freelancers. We saw that in Indonesia for the first month, but then there were not enough resources anymore. In Europe, the COVID-19 restrictions would not have been possible without these big payments. For example, freelancers who could not work anymore needed to stay at home. They got practically a salary for nothing from the state, in a rather unbureaucratic way. A problem was, in Germany and also in other European countries, not all measures were sufficiently limited in time. For example, cafes, restaurants, bars, they were closed for several months, endangering economically a whole branch of the economy. Even if this was necessary, we need to discuss if this was not anyway excessive. If you balance that, could there not have been another way? There were also a problem with restrictions which separated unmarried life partners from the EU and from non-EU countries for a long time. They closed, as you know, they closed the Schengen borders. An Indonesian girlfriend could not visit her German or French boyfriend anymore. And this was for a whole year. If they were married, they were still allowed, but if they were not married, I think that this was excessive for close partnerships. For example, my wife and me, we were very careful. For this reason, we did not leave Indonesia for the time. And finally, there was a problem which we had in Indonesia too, the keeping of dying COVID-19 patients in absolute isolation, separate from families and friends. Of course, that was necessary to protect against COVID-19, but still, I think it was still illegal because the patients who were dying, they could not even say goodbye. Their families, their closest friends, their wife, husband could not even say goodbye anymore. We had this problem in Indonesia too, and I remember from the news that some citizens solved their problem in their own way simply by storming the hospital and breaking into the room. So these are things which need to be worked on. Another problem was the right to equality before the law. That's more technical. Under human rights law, equally dangerous constellations must be treated equally. So in COVID-19, it was very clear if they are all threatening in the same way, the restrictions must apply in the same way. But in Germany, for example, bigger shops and department stores were closed when small shops could still open. Or an interesting topic until High Administrative Court of Saarlouis intervened, body-related services. That means where the service provider needs to work on your body. They were prohibited, like hairdressers, massage, physiotherapist, prostitution, which is legal in Germany. But then they allowed some again. For example, they allowed again massage, but they still prohibited prostitution. But sorry, prostitution in the terms of COVID-19 is not more dangerous than massage or the hairdresser. So the courts finally annulled that. Said, sorry, this is not justified. Interesting is that in the public debate in Europe, there was a tendency to neglect the second dimension of human and fundamental rights. We must not only think of defending freedom, but the state must also protect human rights by effective measures against threats. Also, the state must protect the citizen against COVID-19 and other infectious diseases. Under the European Convention, we have the doctrine of positive obligations developed by the European Court of Human Rights. In Germany, under the German Basic Law, it's called duties of protection. The institutions enjoy, however, a wide margin of appreciation because they are under pressure. On one hand, they must not take excessive measures, they must respect the freedom, and on the other hand, they must protect the citizen. So it was quite interesting. There was one case in spring 2021 in Germany where the German land governments, as a responsible executive, clearly violated the duties to protection. That means they did not protect enough the citizen against COVID when they refused to retake appropriate measures, although a new wave of COVID-19 was just building up. That was a quite serious crisis. For political reasons, they were reluctant. And finally, the German federal legislator intervened with the so-called federal emergency brake, which imposed the most severe COVID-19 restrictions at all, directly in the federal law, without any possibility of the executive to intervene. Even in detail, that was regulated, so the executive was totally out. From the perspective of separation of powers, this was something new, but it was accepted by the Federal Constitutional Court because of the crisis situation in that moment. So, ladies and gentlemen, you see, you can be happy all in all that you stayed your COVID time in Indonesia, not in Europe. It was much harder, even if I don't have good memories of June and July 2021. But all in all, mainly because of the climate conditions, people are more in closed rooms. The restrictions were harder in Europe, but they will keep the lawyers busy to work on that. Whether that all legal or not is still going on. There are still lots of court proceedings, and it will be a big topic, I think, for the next. Thank you.
Thomas, yeah? Okay, we listened to European experiences in COVID, and Pak Thomas actually most of the time staying in Indonesia, yeah? And then he said that, oh, I better to stay in Indonesia rather than to Germany during the COVID because he found not so much restriction in Indonesia. So Okay, and then Pak Thomas also mentions about the right of reparation, yeah, because they have a very different political situations. Even in German, they have a different political, situation and different scheme of reparation of the victim. But it is interesting that for the human rights, past human rights, it goes through the criminal procedure, yeah. So that's much different with Indonesian today. So everybody, participant, now I will open the session for question and answer for about 30 minutes. So I will invite you to give a question if you have, and then of course I will also invite the participant from the Zoom if there are any question from the Zoom. Time is yours. You can raise your hand. Don't be shy to question, and because we have a very, good speakers, the first hands informations come from them. Yeah, from Pak Makarim, from of course from Bu Adnika, and then Pak Thomas. One and the other participant. Do you have any? Okay, first you can come up. Yeah. Introduce your name and the university. Thank you.
Thank you very much. My name is Amalia, and I'm here as a presenter and also representing my firm, Siregar Setiawan Manalo Partnership. So, am I allowed to ask 2 questions? Okay, so first of all, the first question is, I'm really interested with the presentation that was presented by Prof. Makarim that mentioned about the monumental statute and also change the name of things that represent the tragic human rights event that occurred back then. And I'm aware that this is things that happen for a long time, but how creating such status and also changing the name of the station or things in related to the gross human rights violation can be recognized as a progress of the gross violation human rights case? Is it because it's to prove that the government acknowledge or accountable for the event, or is it to compensate the unprocessed judicial procedure? And also how such gestures prevent the human rights violation in the future. And also this question is specifically for Mr. Thomas, because so it is also based on my experience, because last year I was living in the Netherlands and I saw that there are so many refugees that fleeing from Syria and also from Ukraine to the Netherlands. And I'm just interested to know that, do you think COVID-19 creates a severe problem to the host country that receive war refugees to their country? War refugees, yeah. That's my questions, thank you. Amalia.
First questions can be responded by Prof. Makarim and Bu Adnika. Yeah, it's more likely about the measurement of the progress, because Pak Makarim has mentioned about it is a progress, but what is the measurement of the progress? Because whether it is can be very, useful for the account, whether it is about the accountability, and so on. Yeah. So thank you, Pak Makarim. Time is yours.
For the question. As you were aware that the issues is actually is very interesting, because the issue of gross violation of human rights, as mentioned by Ibu Adnika, that the concentrated of the judicial process more focused on the perpetrator, and then the focus of the non-judicial is focused on the victims. So what I mean with the efforts taken in the Trisakti, to change the name and others, is actually try to gives us kind of like encouragement, also satisfaction in the part of the victims, yeah, with regard to the problem that they are facing. For the victims, yeah, the situation that has not been actually resolved judicially are actually making them such kind like that no one care of them. You know, there is a feeling of that. Yeah, there is no one care of them. Yeah, so therefore, wherever we go, yeah, for the 12 cases that has been mentioned by the Komnas HAM, yeah, most of them actually that they want that the issues that they are facing, you know, actually acknowledged by the state. Because, for example, the cases of 65 of 69, yeah, 60, 65, 66, the cases of the Jambu Kepo and others, yeah, they are already old cases. But it is already well published in the newspaper, in media. But there is no saying from the government or from the state that this has been actually happening in the past. So therefore, on the 11th of January 2023, the president made a statement for the first time ever that the state of Indonesia recognized that these cases is happened. You know, for the victims in the provinces, in the area, they consider that the acknowledgement of the cases is a basis for them to talk with the local authority, to talk with the other institutions that may actually open the opportunity to discuss in a very better situation. Because as you are aware also that the victims of the gross violation of human rights, as soon as they were caught like the victims, you know, there are many cases related to their property owned by them was confiscated by some. So by having such kind of like recognition, yeah, this is actually giving way for them to try to fight for the better situation. Thank you.
Mbak Adnika. Thank you, Mbak Yi. I thought it was not meant for me, but okay. Measuring progress on the past human rights violations in Indonesia could not be done in simple way. It is because the political context where the idea of addressing past human rights violation took place was way in the past, more than 20 years ago, in 1998, the political transition. What we can call as measurement of progress at the moment is how to measure the evolutionary process in settling the past human rights violations. Of course, it is debatable when President Jokowi acknowledged and regretting the 12 cases. There are different views in public whether it is a positive progress or it is just, let's say, a rhetoric. But as what Pak Makarim explained, for some victims, we have to acknowledge their aspiration of having been acknowledged as a progress, not just a rhetoric. Because trauma and impact of human rights violations are not only about physical impact, but it is, in many cases, are about dignity. So when they are acknowledged as victims, it means their dignity are repaired. By saying that, I'm not saying that victims who demand for justice are not justified. It is their right to have a call for responsibility, accountability of the state, because this is precisely the meaning of human rights violations. It means it is not about a single individual crime, but it is about how the state being responsible in taking accountability for perpetrators and the system that allow the perpetrators to violate human rights. So, as I said, we have to look forward on the evolutionary process in Indonesia in addressing the past human rights violations. It is probably different from South Africa, different from Argentina, different from Germany and the Europe, where addressing the past was done immediately. Although it's not yet all finished, like in Germany, the crime of Nazi was still in pursuit up until today. So we are need to be hopeful. And again, there are ways to do that. First, finding the non-judicial ways that is compatible with the society. And the second, that is must done not because only of the past, but because of the future, is how we can strengthen the judicial mechanism in Indonesia. Thank you.
Thank you, Mbak Atnike. Pak Thomas?
Thank you. I would first like to add something to your first question. To her answer, I would like to support that. But I would like to talk about the aspect of changing names of bus stations or streets. It has turned out in the European experience that this is indeed important for coming to terms with the human rights violations of the past, because it shows now the society is different. So now we care about what has happened, we change, we say we take our distance from the past. In Germany, we had, in East Europe too, after the end of communism, we had lots of cases where all cities changed their name. For example, from Karl Marx-Stadt to Chemnitz, or from Stalingrad to Volgograd. But also schools, universities changed their names, street names. This is a symbol, but you need to see that in the context that the society stands up and says, we will not allow this again. Also, for that aspect, what our colleague has mentioned, non-recurrence. This is important, and it has an effect on the young people, and it also stops the still existing old people with the old thinking from opening their mouth again too strongly and say it was all okay what we did. So this is because all these symbolic steps, they have a role, but of course, they only have a role. Second, the problem with the refugees, I think, has not been aggravated in Europe by the COVID-19 pandemic, while the refugees, they suffered as the normal population too. And that is a common problem of globalization. And the problem is more the cultural clash which some refugees bring. For example, 1.5 million refugees from Syria coming within 5 or 6 months to Germany. That was the cultural clash. With the refugees from the Ukraine, from the war, it's, for example, much lower because the culture is closer. That is a topic which can be solved. There's also a difference, I need to admit, depending if the refugees are men or women. It's, for example, in Germany, they are very keen to get the smart, educated Afghan women who all needed to leave their country. They want to have them in Germany, but not necessarily the Afghan man who is still in the very old Afghan thinking. So these are basically cultural problems. Moreover, the whole refugee problem has two sides. On one hand, there is a flood of people from a different cultural background, which have also difficulties to integrate. But on the other hand, many European societies have a lack of young skilled workers. So there are lots of cases now in Germany, for example, where the economy stops the deportation of refugees and say, we want to have this man or we want to have this woman, and they offer them working treaties and so on because they need young people. So I think that the refugee problem is basically just abused by a part of the political spectrum, and in the Netherlands, even worse than in Germany.
Thank you. Yeah, I think for several speakers mentions about the issue of the acknowledgement of the victims, the acknowledgement of what was happening in the past. It is a very important issues, and then the recognition of the sufferer. So I think that's more important for them, even though there were discussions about the victims have different aspirations before, yeah. But I think there are a lot of ways to seek justice. There are a lot of ways to reparations. So and then the questions about the refugee, I think it's already mentioned by Pak Thomas. Yeah, I don't need to add more points. Yeah. Now we will invite more questions. I just find out that there are questions from the audience in Zoom as well. So can I give an opportunity to the audience from the Zoom? I'm here. I'm looking at to the Ibu Nika Mutiara from Purwokerto. Do you want to say directly your questions? That okay. If you maybe I just read it, yeah. So this is the question for Bu Adnika, yeah. How to transform the functions of the National Commissions on the Human Rights and the Human Rights Court in Indonesia to increase the effectiveness of non-judicial mechanisms. Yeah, remember, the subject being tried in the Human Rights Court is the individual perpetrator, to override state accountability. Manuel, in fact, the state is a party with high potential to do human rights violation. Okay, so I also invite the other question. Yeah, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, we will cooperate all. Yeah, 5, and then we will distribute who will answer the question. Okay, so starting from Ibu, silahkan.
Okay, good morning, Ibu I, Ibu Adnika, Prof. Makarim, and also Prof. Thomas. It's very glad to meet you all here. I'm Madina, founder and also managing director of AGS Madina Law Firm, and also PT Cantaka Nusantara. It's very interesting topic, of course, that this morning, especially there are so many issues post-pandemic era, especially with the war in Russia and Ukraine also. So I would like to address about the human rights issue at this moment regarding the refugees from the other countries. That now years they're willing and waiting to get the destination to the destination state like Australia. So I think it's more than 15 years already in Indonesia, and as we understand that this refugee also has a lot of problem in Indonesia, and also become our social problem and of course economical problem in Indonesia. Especially Bu Adnika, I would like to address the question to you as a Komnas HAM. What is your opinion, especially for some of them, they have illegal marriage in Indonesia, and also illegal trading also, and even sexual crime like pedophile happening in this country. And we also have a discussion with immigration authority that all these refugees make our country also difficult because we have to face so many problems. But in the other hand, they're also seeking for the protection from Komnas HAM. So I would like to make a clarification in here, if it's possible. So what is your opinion about the refugee that already become a crime, but seeking for the protection from Komnas HAM in terms of they want to, instead of deportation? Thank you.
Thank you, Mbak Madina. I will move to this. Yes, the other responder. The other Mas. Yeah.
Thank you for opportunities. My name is Darlin Rizky. I'm from graduate school Universitas Gadjah Mada, and I'm not from this faculty. So my question uh, different. Agak beda ya.
Okay.
Sorry, my English not well. There is keyword I take from Ibu tadi about gender, law of gender. Yeah. In pandemic, what do you think about age law its merits in 19 years? Kesamaan usia in 19 years, men and women in regulations 16 of 2019. Because kesetaraan usia, yes, kesetaraan usia is really dapat mencegah gitu, dapat mencegah pernikahan di bawah umur. Because in right now, but dispensation of marriage is really grow up in every years. I think that legal of mahkamah is not going well, because it's not happening to mencegah to protection of marriage in underage. So what do you think about that? And I still don't understand what exactly is the Supreme Court of receiving its age equality law with answer the legal certainty. Alasan penerimaan kesetaraan usia laki-laki dan perempuan itu adalah karena kepastian hukum. Sampai saat ini saya belum memahami sepenuhnya apa sebenarnya maksud daripada itu. Okay. Pada saat pengajuan sidang pertama, berbagai dokumen tentang itu diberikan tetapi ditolak. Okay. Pada ajuan kedua dialasankan dengan kesetaraan hukum. Saya sebenarnya belum dapat memahami itu dalam penelitian yang kami buat begitu. Okay. And then
make it short.
Okay.
Thank you.
The last question from Mr. What do you think community group are legally affected by the COVID in pandemic? Community group are legally affected by the COVID pandemic, and how their access in legal justice, and how the condition in Indonesia and Germany, in your country, of community group is really affected by the pandemic, specifically in law, access in law justice. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. There's a long questions, yeah. So 1, 2, yeah, Pak, silakan. But I'm sorry, we can make it short, yeah.
Okay, thank you for your time. My name is Anya. I'm from the Faculty of Law of Erlangga University. My question.
Sorry, the name?
Anya.
Anya.
Okay, my question
from
Faculty of Law Erlangga University.
LA University.
My question would be for Prof. Makarim and Bu Atnika. There are some critics regarding the non-judicial mechanism, non-judicial team for past gross human rights violation, because it undermines the rights of justice for the victims, so that the perpetrators can be accountable. What do you think about those? What do you think about those critics? Because some critics view that the non-judicial is a compromising response from the government, because some of the alleged perpetrators still have political power or political influence in current government. Thank you very much.
Yeah. And then next, Ibu dulu ya. Ibu satu, ya baru nanti terakhir sebelah sana.
Okay, terima kasih. Thank you. We're talking about victim, but how about...
Ibu boleh memperkenalkan diri terlebih dahulu.
Okay, I'm so sorry. I'm Diah Susilawati. I'm from Yogyakarta Court. We're talking about victim, but how about actor of human rights actor? I have noted that we have many problem as human rights. Example, we just have 4 courts in Indonesia, in Medan, Makassar, Surabaya, and Jakarta. So it's a long distance for victim or actor for to the courts and the first. And we have Komnas HAM that they not are as KPK, they don't have to accused into the courts. And so, but after post of pandemic era, I read in the news that President Joko Widodo will resolve case of the post-human rights violence that the Supreme Court is also recruit the new judge for in the tingkat pertama, banding and kasasi. So it is a good news for us, and I think just social for control of this. So we cannot need rights. Jadi ada satu rumah statuta. Maybe we need not statuta rumah, but we have government to good willing for that's human rights. In the second, that after post-pandemic, many employer have PHK, so social and culture rights, government have should to manage that for workers who can the work again. I think that so sorry, my English not so good.
Thank you, Budi, and I think I get the point. Yeah, it's about discussions about the offenders. How do we, address the offenders? Not only about the victims, but the offenders. It's a good news that there is recruitment in the Supreme Court for the court, Human Rights Court. It meaning that there is a political will to continue. Yeah. The not only non-judicial mechanism, but might be it goes to the judicial mechanism. Yeah. Okay. And then I think about the social security issue, you can respond it, but there will be another sessions in the third day on Saturday. We will discuss a lot about the social security issues, particularly for those worker and then vulnerable group. Yeah. Thank you. So last question. Yeah.
Thank you. Good morning, all. My name is Joshua. I'm from Bandung. My question is for Professor Thomas Schultz. I want to ask about your perspective on Article 2 and 8 European Commission on Human Rights. It's about the duty of care of states and the right of private and family life regarding to the human rights issue. How do European experience could be transformed in Indonesia, especially if we are talking about access to justice? Thank you.
So would you mind to repeat it again, because Pak Thomas has not get the main
My
point.
question is about Article 2 and 8, European Commission of Human Rights. It's about duty of care and the right to private and family life. How do these, from European experience, could be transformed to Indonesian perspective, especially if we are talking about access to justice?
Okay, I think I will give a first for Pak Makarim, if you want to respond the general points, yeah, from 6 questions, and after that I will give to Pak Thomas, and then because there are a lot of questions comes to Bu Adnika. I will give the last opportunity Bu Adnika to answer at least 4 big questions. Time is yours, Pak Makarim.
I thanks all of the questions. Yeah. First, I would like to highlight, yeah, that this about the way to address the problem of the perpetrator, yeah, or the offender. Of course, the judicial mechanism is important way to address this one. Yeah. So the effort to improve the recruitment of the judge is actually the way, yeah, to make the judicial process very getting strong. Yeah. Secondly, actually, I personally think over the judicial mechanism that based on the law number 26, 2000. Yeah, we have several court already, you know, on the issues of Abipura, on the issue of Timor-Leste, on the issues of Tanjung Priok, on the issue of Paniai. Yeah, on the first stage, that there are some, yeah, already judged, yeah, to involve on the crime, on the issues. Yeah, but finally, all of the persons are free. Yeah. So this is happened also with the way the Komnas HAM already worked to prepare all of the documents and then to be submitted to the Office of the Attorney General. Yeah. And then right away, the response is that they written it back to the Komnas HAM again. And they consider that it is not sufficient enough, yeah, according to the procedures. So I think, maybe I'm wrong, but I'm suggesting maybe it's time for us to review again the law number 26, yeah, of the year 2000, yeah, particularly on hukum acara. Why it happens like that, you know? Because it is a silly thing, you know, to see that it is a repetition of, you know, sending the document from Komnas HAM, which is actually by law, Komnas HAM is considered like pro justicia on it, yeah. But it was followed by the Office of the Attorney General to return it back, you know. So it seems that there is a need to time to review again whether we can make such kind of like a formula to try to make such kind of like harmonized way, yeah, about processing the issues. Secondly, Mr. Ania, yeah, highlight the issues with regard to, you know, if the non-judicial is processed, yeah, it is actually undermine the right of the person for the judicial process. Yeah. So if we listen carefully the statement by the President of the Republic of Indonesia on 11 January, yeah, 2023, he mentioned that actually the non-judicial process is not replacing, yeah, the judicial process, because the judicial process exists. The presidential process already provided by law. Yeah. So the problem is, how can we proceed further with the fact, with the witnesses, yeah, for proceeding the issues. So I have a strong belief that it is important to have the judicial process as well as the non-judicial process. Yeah. So I hope that this be also addressed eventually. So I still mentioned what will be the next step of this TPP HAM. Yeah. I would like to share with you the way the presidents discussed about it with us on the 11th before the announcement of the statement of the president to the public, we have a meeting about 1 hour with the president. And then he said to us that he would like to have like a meeting of the cabinet, yeah, to make sure about the follow-up of the recommendation of the team. So I was informed that the meeting of the cabinet took place already. So in the meeting of the cabinet, there was a discussion of instruction by the president to the Ministry of State Secretary, as well as the coordinator minister of Polhukam, to try to prepare Inpres and Kepres for assigning the related ministry to implement, yeah, with regard to the recommendation made by the team. Secondly, he mentioned that he is going to set up the team of monitoring, try to make sure that all recommendations be implemented. If, for example, there is a problem of the implementation of one recommendation, so the team supposed to be providing such kind of the answer of the way out, yeah, for the implementation. I was informed by telephone call that he asked me whether I'm ready to be member of the team. I said that for the sake of the implementation of the recommendation of Team PP Ham, I'm ready. You know. Yes, thank you.
Karim, and time for Pak Thomas.
Okay, I can only add some comments on some questions concerning first the refugees and the situation in Indonesia. We need to take into account, if I'm informed correctly, that Indonesia has not ratified the Geneva Refugee Convention. That makes a fundamental difference. So all West European countries have ratified the Geneva Refugee Convention, and this plays a very important role in the dealing with the refugees, because it has certain standards. On the second question about community groups and access to legal justice in Germany and in most West European countries, we don't have special rights for community groups at all, because the system in Europe is focusing on the protection of the individual. So that means what we have, what is usually individuals who formally will file a complaint or legal action before the court, and these individuals are supported by civil society organizations. But all this runs under the name of the individual citizen, or can be several individual citizens which have been affected by something. This would be the technique, but like that, everybody has access to justice. So there is also legal aid for those who do not have the resources. Now the question, interesting question of Mr. Ayer about judicial and non-judicial mechanisms. From my European experience, I would clearly say, for us, it's the judicial mechanisms which is important. But why? Because the judiciary works a little bit different in Europe than in Southeast Asia. There is, in West Europe, there is very, very little corruption. And judges, for example, are not at all afraid of fighting against the government, fighting against the president. It's not a problem fighting against powerful social or religious groups. It's not a problem for the judge, but in Indonesia it is. So you need to know this background. Also, I think that in any case, non-judicial mechanisms are always, for me, they only have a complementary function, but it's still an important function. For example, when it comes to acknowledgement of the crimes of the past, these non-judicial mechanisms are important, because the judicial mechanisms are limited to the very specific question of the specific case. And this is not enough to come to terms in the society with the past human rights violations. So that's why I think that we need both of that. However, from the European perspective, it's very clear. The protection of human rights is primary, always the mission of the court, and it is the mission of every court. So in Europe, we think the idea of a special human rights court is a little bit strange. Every court must be a human rights court, and nobody should be accepted as a judge who has not a profound knowledge about human rights. So in administrative law, for example, in France, in Germany, in Spain, Italy, that works quite well. That's why we think that it would be important for better protection, also in Indonesia, to focus on the better qualification of the judges. The last question on the European Convention, I do not understand exactly what you mean, because there is no Article 288 of the European Convention. That must be a misunderstanding. Maybe we can talk in the break about that. But you need to explain your question. Thank you.
Okay. All right, so the last speakers to respond most of the question, Mbak Atnika.
Thank you, Ibu Iyi and Pak Thomas, for mentioning the different situation of European judiciary or German judiciary in comparison to Indonesia. But it is not only about the different situation and condition of the judiciary, but we have to look at the historical political transition happening in different countries, resulted in different way in dealing with the past. For Germany, we have to remember that Germany lost the Second World War. So the political transition happening in Germany happened under the control of international community. The perpetrators of Nazi crimes were being prosecuted under the Nuremberg, tried by international prosecutors and judges. So it is different when a country must dealing with the past by themselves. So if we compare for Indonesia with other countries such as the South Africa, for example, even South Africa, where ANC won a big power at the time, they have to deal with the previous actors by giving them blanket amnesty. While in Indonesia, the political transition are not resulted in a significant transfer of power from the previous regime to the new regime. So the negotiation would be again different than what happened in Germany and in South Africa. So that's what we have now. So we cannot differentiate judiciary with the political situation. It is always influenced by political situation. But I'm not saying that what is happening in Indonesia is not an achievement compared to the way it has been trying to deal with its political transition. So I would like to start with the question still concerning our topic, because most of the questions are not within the topic that we are discussing. Komnas HAM's role remain to be as prescribed by the law, number 39 on human rights law and 26/2000 on human rights court. We cannot just transform ourselves and now dealing with the non-judicial mechanism. But what Komnas HAM do in investigating are the basis for the non-judicial mechanism to work. So if Komnas HAM continue its role in strengthening its investigation procedures, there would be information and data that can be used for non-judicial and both for the judicial mechanism. And we are in this in discussion, Pak Makarim, later if the follow-up recommendation from TPP HAM will be conducted, then Komnas HAM will be included, not as the implementer, but we could give our recommendation according to our function and mandates to ensure that the rights of victims are fulfilled. So we will need to see forward about this. The critics to TPP HAM, I think Pak Makarim answered it completely. The idea was not to substitute the judiciary. So we have some opportunities through the non-judicial mechanism, while the judicial mechanism's problem remain. So we have to do two homeworks now, strengthening the non-judicial and strengthening the judicial, not by substituting the mechanism. As I explained, these two mechanisms has its own function and contribution in fulfilling the rights of the victims. Now I would like to move to the other question on different issues on marriage law. As Komnas HAM, we have to be ready to be questioned on whatever issues. But luckily, I wrote some articles on this marriage law in the past. So in the first judicial review, the file was rejected by the court because the argument for reviewing or annulling the marriage law, which differentiated the minimum age between women and men from women was 16 and the man was 19. The file or the people who filed the case to the court using the argument of child rights, because having different age for women and men to be married has resulted in the violation of child rights, which is in the argumentation, it's not related to the discrimination. Therefore, the Constitutional Court reject the file. The second case filed to the court used the argument of gender-based discrimination, which is in my assessment, it sounds better. It is more, it has stronger argument because it is in fact differentiating men and women in terms of age to be married. While on the child rights issue was not, the argument was not as strong as the discrimination based on gender. So that's the reason. On the refugee, as Pak Thomas mentioned, Indonesia is not party to the Refugee Convention, but somehow Indonesia must deal with the refugee because in our neighborhood, there are refugees fled to Indonesia and Indonesia has to deal with that. And some of them also, the cases or situation happened to the refugee were being raised to Komnas HAM. Of course, as national human rights institution, although without the convention, we have to deal with any person living in Indonesian territory. So we have to deal with that. But the question whether a refugee committing crime should be punished, it is of course under the judiciary system. It's not on Komnas HAM. So we have to see how the law prescribe punishment or criminal sanction for non-citizen in Indonesia. I think it is still applicable. And ways to deal with the refugee problem in Indonesia, I think cannot be solved by Indonesian only. The problem of refugee must be solved from the roots of the problem, which is the conflicts, wars, or situation that is happening from the sending countries. And I think that's another different discussion. So I hope for the court, the judges, the appointment of judges, I think that's precisely the problems that I raised in my presentation. Although Pak Thomas mentioned it clearly, ideally there should not be a different court for human rights and the general criminal court. But that is what we have in Indonesia, so we have to deal with that at the moment. Whether the solution would be to change the law, to change the judiciary system, that will be a long way to go. But we have to follow what is happening with the appointment of human rights court judges that is happening now in the Supreme Court. If you see the information, there are only 3 judges who are being sent to the parliament, while we need 2 judges, ad hoc judges at least for the court. It means we are lacking in the numbers of candidates of judges, let alone the backgrounds. So 3 of them are not coming from human rights background. One is former police officer, one is judges on corruption, and there is one other. So the 3 of them, they don't have experience in handling human rights cases. So that's the problem. What is the solution? I think we need to solve it together on legal reform and non-judicial mechanism or ways to deal with the past human rights violations. Thank you.
Very much. Yeah, I think we have a long discussion, but I believe that you enjoyed the discussion because there are a lot of questions. There are 7 participants actively engaged with the discussion. So I will not give any more time to every speakers, but there are some next steps that need to be done. What I'm trying to pull from each of respondents. The first one, I think we agree that we need to continue to the process of non-judicial mechanism, which is need to be strengthened, and also not to replace or not to not to replace the judicial mechanism. So both are need to be continue the process of it. And then the second one, because of it, it is need to be clarified, the role of Komnas HAM and the prosecutor, because Adnika has mentioned about the lack of link between prosecutor and Komnas HAM, particularly after the investigation come from Komnas HAM. So because most of the cases are not continued to be processed by the prosecutor. Because of it, I think the race come from Prof. Makarim, that is the review of the law on human rights court. It is important to be done. I think the academician, you need start to looking at again, because the human rights court in Indonesia is not for all human rights cases. It's only specifically on the gross human rights violation. So there is a lack of the issues of the human rights violation that are not gross human rights violation. I think that's another issue. And then the other issue that comes up today, the marriage, underage married, the refugees married, and then I think 2 of it, we can continue the discussion. I believe that there are presentations paper on the issue of underage married as well. And then there are issues to be discussed in the panel on refugee. So we can continue our discussion. And then just remember that this is only the first day. Tomorrow we have also a plenary, which is very interesting as well. We discuss about the Constitutional Court and the challenge and the futures, challenge today and the future. And then we also have the 3rd plenary sessions of very important speakers as well, with discussing about the social justice, and its challenge in the future. I think that's all for today. Thank you very much for your patience. Thank you very much for your participation, and thank you so much for Prof. Makarim, Mbak Adnika, and Prof. Thomas, and give applause for all of us. And then I handed these sessions to the organizer. Thank you.
Thank you very much. For the next agenda, there will be a delivery of award plaques and certificates by Mrs. Sriwiyanti Ediono, SH, LLM, HR, PhD, to Prof. Dr. Mr. Makarim Wibisono, MA. I'm sorry, the delivery of award, plaques, and certificates by Mr. Yance.
And for the next one, to Dr. Mrs. Arnika Nova Sigiro.
And for the next one, Prof. Thomas Smith. And for the last, we would like to say thank you very much. Audiences, please remain seated as there will be information regarding our sponsorship from PT Cempaka. PT Cempaka, may proceed.
PT Cempaka, the time is yours.
Bapak Ibu sekalian yang menyelenggarakan kongres Pak Yance dan teman-teman Bu Iyi mungkin sudah keluar. Kali ini kami diberikan kesempatan untuk sedikit mempresentasikan salah satu apa yang bisa kita persembahkan untuk kalangan legal di Indonesia. Karena kebetulan kami AGS Madinah Law Firm itu ditunjuk sebagai satu-satunya license partner dari Toles Cambridge untuk menyelenggarakan pelatihan kursus atau legal English di Indonesia. Karena kami juga ada perusahaan yang dinamakan Cantaka, maka kami juga dalam pelaksanaannya nanti akan diselenggarakan oleh Cantaka. Nah, Cantaka ini nanti akan berkolaborasi dengan beberapa kampus dan kebetulan karena saya alumni Fakultas Hukum UGM, sehingga dalam kesempatan kali ini sepertinya kita harus memulai dari UGM dulu. Perkenankan, di sini kami ada Mr. Vernon langsung, Vernon Allen. Beliau adalah teacher of Toles dari Cambridge langsung, sehingga nanti akan lebih detail dijelaskan oleh Mr. Vernon. Tapi sebelumnya izinkan kami untuk memperkenalkan perusahaan kami, PT Cantaka Nusantara. Jadi PT kami berdiri sejak tahun 2018 mengawali sebagai perusahaan infrastruktur di bidang pendidikan dan infrastruktur sosial lainnya. Lalu kami juga ada visa perizinan pendirian perusahaan dan juga sekarang terkait dengan education. Untuk yang educationnya kami khusus untuk TOLES ini baru kita inisiasi sejak 2020 awal pandemi. Namun untuk saat ini kami sudah mulai untuk bisa launching dan insya Allah ini yang pertama kali nanti mungkin dengan UGM, sehingga nanti kami persilahkan untuk bisa melakukan yang berminat untuk bisa tes di sini secara langsung dan kebetulan dengan Mr. Vernon langsung, sehingga nanti skor TOLES-nya kira-kira Bapak dan Ibu yang ada di sini kira-kira berapa bisa diukur dari sini. Perlu diketahui bahwa TOLES ini mungkin kalau di Indonesia belum cukup familiar, tapi untuk di luar negeri kalau kita mau melamar di beberapa perusahaan atau law firm terkenal, Baker & McKenzie atau PwC, kita harus menyertakan sertifikat TOLES untuk lawyer atau legalnya. Atau kalau misalnya mau apply di European Bank, Central Bank atau European Central Justice, itu juga kita harus menyertakan TOLES. TOLES sendiri ada 3 jenjang atau 3 level, level foundation, higher, sama advance. Nah untuk untuk yang nanti akan kita placementkan, kita tes ke Bapak Ibu sekalian, itu kira-kira nanti Bapak Ibu di sini skornya di level berapa. Nah nanti kalau diperlukan untuk misalnya pelatihan untuk mendapatkan skor TOLES-nya, kita akan masukkan di beberapa level itu. Selebihnya sih mungkin nanti untuk lebih detailnya, Mr. Vernon, would you like to continue? Thank you.
Good morning. Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to speak to you today. It's going to be a very short presentation about TOLES. So, okay, do I have a slide? No. Okay, what is TOLES? T-O-L-E-S is the Teaching of Legal English System. Okay, so the Teaching of Legal English System, basically it's a legal English course. So when you come to study legal English, you study grammar, vocabulary, law collocations, interacting in legal English if you were like in a law firm in London. Okay, grammar, prepositions, things like that. It's a very interactive course and quite intense and very good course to do. Basically, it's established in the year 2000. It's established in the year 2000 from Cambridge Law Studio and the TOLES Centre, both based in the UK. Yes, okay. So basically, there's 2 levels. There's foundation level and higher level. In the book is you've got banking vocabulary, understanding contracts, contract drafting, company law, employment law. Usually, I'd say there's 2 levels, foundation and higher. Foundation would be the main level, and then the higher level. Thank you very much. I'm sorry because I wanted it. Okay, thank you very much. And if you have any questions, please come to ask me. I'm outside in the booth and I can give you more information. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Once again, thank you very much for the audience. We would like to end, and we are closing the conference.
Okay, thank you very much for our master of ceremony today, and all participants. After this is a break and lunch time. For the next, after eating, the participants are welcome to go up to the fifth floor to take part in the parallelizations activities as a guest participants. For the room, please choose, and we have 3 rooms. There is B52, B53, and B55. Consumption can be provided in the registration room. For lunch can be done round table at the back of the plenary room. And once again, consumption can be provided in the registration room, and for the lunch can be done at the back of the plenary room. There is in the round table. Thank you.